came into this season with a prediction of the Chicago Bulls winning about 34 to 35-ish games. And while the Chicago Bulls are currently on pace to even not live up to that expectation, one thing that the Bulls have done that I hope for is to see a team that hustles more. We're going to talk about why. Over the stretch of games since the All-Star break, the Chicago Bulls are actually one of the best hustle stats teams in the NBA. And despite the losing that they've done, this Bulls team does refuse to go away. And why I think that's a good foundation to set, especially with the young players that we have here going into next season. We'll talk a little bit about that, plus the injuries around the Chicago Bulls, and dive a little bit into the mailbag. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Ter Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And I know that the eye test matters with stuff like this, right? Like the hustle stats and things like that are fairly new, but when you watch this Chicago Bulls team play, and this was evident in last night's game, that despite losing, despite letting up a big run by the Indiana Pacers, at times the Bulls defense just not being able to stop that team and the runs that they were on, this is a team that has been hustling. Execution may be something that holds this team back. Skill may be a thing that holds this team back, especially against certain teams. But one thing you cannot deny about the Chicago Bulls is that they aren't out there playing hard, they're playing connected, and they're playing much more together. And I think when you look at a team that's trying to now build, right, that's trying to establish themselves, you got young players like Josh Giddy, young players like Buzelis who are 20 and 22 years old, respectively, right? You got players that are trying to re-show that the league, that they still are a factor in this league, and guys like Zach Collins, who's out there really playing really good for the Chicago Bulls here lately, giving us some good minutes. You got Trey Jones hustling out there, right? You got those guys that are contributing to that. Kevin Huerter wasn't in yesterday's game, but he even has been a player that's definitely helped the Chicago Bulls. And this new kind of, I hesitate to call it an identity. I don't think it's fair right now to call it an identity. They're establishing one, right? Way too small of a sample size to really say anything like that. But you got players that are building. Now, Julian Phillips and Dalen Terry haven't necessarily done the most with their opportunities that I thought that they would up until this point, like since the All-Star break, but even their opportunities haven't been hugely consistent either, right? Dalen Terry had an opportunity starting yesterday, and he just didn't look good out there. It's not offensively, he looked out of sync at times. Defensively, we've seen way better defensively from Dalen Terry out there, but it is what it is, right? Jalen Smith, another guy that's, despite how long he's been in the league, he's still a fairly young guy as well, still trying to show some things, right? And, I talked a lot after yesterday's game on the post-game show about why, seeing Josh Giddy, when his shot's not falling, him going to attack mode is really good, right? And that's not something that's been consistent, right? He had 11 free throw attempts yesterday. He only averages 2.5 on the season, right? So it would be unfair for me to say that, this is something that, oh my God, Josh Giddy's just doing so much better at this. He hasn't yet. He's had one game of it. But this also was the first game where his shot hasn't fallen in quite a while, right? So we really, we need to see if Josh Giddey's going to continue to be able to establish that. If that was a one-off, or was that a conscious thing that we're going to start seeing with Josh Giddey's game, right? When you look at it, over the last month, right, in the month of February, he did average 4.5 free throw attempts per game, which, like I said, that's basically double what he was doing earlier in the season. So maybe there is some sign of that. And, in the month of February, he shot 50% from the field, 53% from three. So he didn't have a lot of games to where his shot wasn't falling to where he needed to go to those type of things. But that's something that's developing. Seeing Kobe White in the first half of the game was really a revelation, but then only 6 points in the second half. You could say that may have been due to the thumb injury and, things like that. He wasn't as aggressive in the fourth quarter. But one of the things that have really helped build this version of the Chicago Bulls team is the place where they have hustled since the All-Star break, right? Since the All-Star breaks, the Bulls are second in contested shots per game. They're the second best at contesting and closing out shots in the game. And that's overall between twos and threes. If you want to break it down specifically, they are third best in the NBA at closing out and contesting three-point shots. You're not getting wide open shots against the Chicago Bulls more times than not. Now, the Indiana Pacers game was a little bit different, especially in that first half. They had some open shots there. The Bulls needed to get better at rotating out and closing out on. Contested two-point shots, the Chicago Bulls are actually fifth in the NBA in that since the All-Star break, which is really good as well. The Chicago Bulls went from that, just to highlight that, they are towards, on the season, they are towards the bottom of the league in both those areas as far as contested shots and contested threes. If you look at the entirety of the season, that's how much things are starting to change for the Chicago Bulls, right? They're starting to contest shots a lot better than what they were in earlier in the season. So that's something that's starting to grow for the team, and you like to see that, right? And so, when you look as well as like fighting over loose balls, right? The Chicago Bulls right now, in that time, they are fourth in the league as far as offensive loose balls recovered. As far as defensive loose balls, it's still in the middle of the pack of the league. That is what it is there, right? It is what it is. You're not going to win them all. They're about 10th as far as percentage of loose balls covered, so they're fighting after the loose balls as well. But one of the things that really stood out to me for the Chicago Bulls, if you look at post All-Star break, right, which is really big, percentage of loose balls recovered, they are sixth in the league since the All-Star break as far as loose balls recovered on offense, right? And overall in loose balls recovered, they are number one in the league at going after loose balls since the All-Star break. Number one in the league, right? So to go from you're a little bit lesser than the middle of the pack to the number one, that's crazy development for a team that's just, again, trying to fight hard. This Bulls team understands that it's not as talented, all right? And they're giving a lot more effort than what we saw earlier in the season. The thing that also stands out to me a lot with the team, with the Chicago Bulls team, is we look at points off screens. We're starting to grow in that area as well, and that's been something, if you've been watching me for a while, I've been calling out the Bulls don't run enough screens. They don't run enough those off-ball actions. The Bulls are moving more off-ball. And so what is causing this, right? You have the same head coach, right? Your starting five has changed because of injury and because of trades. You still have a lot of the pillars still left there of the starting five, though, right? Have the same assistants. You don't typically see such a drastic change in this in the season. Why is that happening? Right? Why is that starting to develop for this team? And I think that we're seeing the Bulls team start to develop an identity. Now, right now, it could just be looked at as you traded your best player, players got to step up. And I'll say this. Of course, I'll look at what they do between now and the end of the season, and I'll look at that and review it. But it really will be telling how the Bulls start off next season, right? Are they still this gritty hustle team, right? Because that's what they're going to need to be, right? While this team does not have a star, they don't have a star. They don't have anything near a star level player. And, they just don't. We're not even close to having a player yet that we could say is a star yet. We just don't have that yet, right? No, we have players that have the chance maybe to turn into stars, absolutely. But we don't have those players yet that you can fairly look at and say, no, this guy's a star in this league. So while you're looking to establish that, you want to establish identity. What's one of the things that I've been saying a lot here, right, is getting back to the baby Bulls era, meaning that a young team that fights hard, you have some key veterans on it as well, but that fights hard, that plays together, that plays connectedly, right? And that's what this Bulls team is doing, because you know what? Outside of the hustle stats, the thing that has been most impressive about this Bulls team over this stretch of time is the assist percentage. We are the sixth best team in assist percentage in the league over the last 5 games. Over the last 5 games and over the last 10 games, we're still in the top 10. This team, because they are playing more connected and playing more together. And there's just no way around that. And even in the last 20, if you look at the last 20 games, the Bulls are 5th in assist percentage, despite having a 6-14 record over those last 20 games, right? Those are things where you want to see a team start playing together. That's how you start developing guys. And we need to start fitting in a more traditional role. And so looking at this team and how they are hustling, how they are playing together, and everything's just starting to look better. Like, that's it. And I know people are like, I'm not judging the season anymore off wins and losses. We know that this Bulls team is going to lose more games than it wins. There's just no way around that. There's nothing that you can say, do, or any kind of stat that you can like, this team is going to lose a shit ton of basketball games between here and the end of the season. And that's what the pro tanking fans want, right? But when you're looking at how this team, and it's not just Josh Giddy, I know that that's been the storyline for a lot, and it deserves to be. But you look at Modest Buzelis and Josh Giddy have seen the biggest upticks in points per game average since the All-Star break. And that's what you want to see from two of your young pillars, right? Like that's it. Like Ayo hasn't really been healthy over that time. He's out for the remainder of the season. Kobe's been, in his slump or inconsistency, whatever you want to call it, right? But, these guys are playing well, and I think you're starting to see how now with the quicker pace, the Bulls aren't taking nearly as many threes as what they were taking earlier in the season either, which is, something that I like to see as well over that time, right? Like, they were so reliant on threes. Like at this point now, the three-pointer has gone from over 50% of the Bulls offense to over the last 4 games, it's only 46% of the Bulls offense. Now, I get it. That's still a large chunk of the offense, but that just shows you that they are doing a lot more. The Bulls shooting has gone from being, in the paint being a very small portion of the Bulls shooting to now we are shooting the ball a lot more in the paint as well. It's starting to become 25% of our offense, and I think it could become even more of that, especially with the rise of Zach Collins and how he's been playing. So this is a team that you still can look at and you can still pull some things away on. Hey, they are starting to do some right things here. And the wins aren't coming. The wins aren't going to come. A lot of Bulls fans don't want to see the wins come either way, right? But this team isn't just giving it away anymore. This isn't a team that you, like I could say earlier in the season, just had a lack of heart at times. This team is actually playing with heart. And I tell you what, one thing that I will bet on, right, is that I think that you can go out and find a player with the draft every year, with things like that. You can go out and find a skill player. Something that you can't always find and that's harder to get with your team when you don't have it is establishing heart. This team is playing with heart right now. Now, I want to see it for a full season. The remainder of the 21 games that we have left, great. I would love to see 21 games of nothing but heart and hustle, right? That's what we're seeing develop with this team, a team of heart and hustle. And I love to be able to say that about my team, even amidst losing. I love to be able to say that it'd be worse if we had a team that was losing and didn't give a shit and was not playing with heart. We have a team that's playing with heart. We have a team that's hustling. We have a team that's playing connected with the assist percentage. We have a team that's starting to figure out how to play off each other. Now we got to see if we can build off on that and if we can find the talent, the skill, right? Next year in the draft, we can find one of those players. Can we find that player that can help start changing the direction? We're not going to find, it's very rare you find a player who singly just changes the direction of your franchise. But I tell you what, I'd rather bet, and it's a better feeling into the season playing with heart and hustle than it is just ending the season on just a tons of losses and your team looks like they're completely dejected. So, that's the part that I wanted to talk about and highlight today. We'll see what the future holds for the Chicago Bulls. You guys can let me know what you guys think on that down below. Now, yesterday, and I dropped an emergency video on this, we got word that Ayo Dosunmu was out for the season with his shoulder injury. He tried to play through it. His shooting percentages were affected by that. And we've seen Ayo Dosunmu and what he hasn't played too well this season at times, right? And he definitely looked in that first game back with that shoulder heavily taped up. I'm sure that the Bulls sat down with Ayo Dosunmu. They made the decision. They were just like, hey, let's go ahead and opt for the surgery now. We're not really competing for anything. Go ahead and get your surgery. And that way you can have a quicker rehab and turnaround process. It could be anywhere between 3 and 4 months of Ayo Dosunmu in a rehab. If you're able to start that and jumpstart that early, that's the great part of it, right? Get that done in the offseason. If he did wait to the end of the season, there was a risk of running that right up against the around training camp, the start of that when he'd be done with rehab. Now he's not going to have to worry about that. He'll be done with rehab. It is what it is there. Alonzo Ball was also out with a wrist injury yesterday. Kevin Huerter missed as well. And then we got Kobe White, who played with the rest of the game, but he suffered a thumb injury as well. Now, I have speculated 100% speculation. I want to be clear on this. But if you look in the second half of that game, his thumb was heavily taped up. I would not be surprised if we see Kobe White miss a game, or if we may even see him miss a couple of games. Like, this is where the Bulls are able to tank, right? Like, if you have a player with any type of injury, you can sit them out, right? So, that's what we see other teams do. That may be what we see the Chicago Bulls do here. I would not be surprised at all if over the remainder of the season, if you suffer any type of ding, dunk, or whatever it is on your body, the Bulls are going to be like, oh yeah, that's a week. That's it's I'm joking there, but there is some seriousness to that this is the Bulls' opportunity to sit guys, right? Not only make sure the guys are rest up, you're also not making sure that they don't have a chance of aggravating anything, making it worse, right? But then especially with Kobe and his thumb, like Kobe usually doesn't play through injury. Well, I commend him because Kobe White has played games through games with injuries quite a bit. He's just never really effective with those when he does that. So, Kobe White, especially with his future, something in question on what has to happen for him in the future. You want to look at that as preserving that as well. So, the Bulls right now are going through it. You got Vooch, who's out with a quad injury, right? You got Alonzo, who missed the game, Kevin Huerter, who missed the game, Jalen Carter missed almost a week, right? So you have those things. Ayo's out for the rest of the year. We heard word yesterday that Patrick Williams is about another week before they're going to reevaluate him. So about another week that Patrick Williams is going to be out. By the time he comes back, we'll have like 16 games left. So, it is what it is there with Patrick Williams. So, it just, this Bulls team, as I've been saying for a while now, they're not going to win a lot of basketball games. And that's perfectly fine when it comes down to it as well. Like the season, there's things that are in their control, things that are out of their control, right? One thing, though, that I will say is that the Chicago Bulls, if they don't lose out, right, and they're not going to lose every game, but they are in danger of moving from 8th worst record to the 9th worst record in the league, which would take their top 4% from 20.3 down to 13.9, and their chance at the number 1 overall pick from 4.5 down to 3%. If the San Antonio Spurs pass them up, as far as getting a worse record than them, with Wemby being out, they're 3-7 in their last 10. The Bulls are 2-8. That's something to look out for as well with this Bulls team. So look out for that. That's the area the Bulls really kind of don't want to be in, but I guess we'll see where it shakes out there for them. But with that said, it is Monday. I do like to get the overflow from the voicemail so we can start off the week fresh. Let's get into these, man. We got 2 voicemails I'm going to get into. The first one, this one's from Shay.
What's up, Hayes? This is Shay. I've been hearing you say, Giddy's staying this and that, and he's proven that he belongs on the team and this and that. And again, I'm not a Josh Giddy fan or I'm not a Josh Giddy hater, but I have to look at this in a realistic standpoint. Yeah, he's performing well with the Bulls, and he's doing pretty good and all that. But we also have to take into consideration that a lot of teams are looking for a point guard with Josh Giddey's skill set. And knowing that he doesn't necessarily need to score and he's been improving on defense, a lot of teams could look to pay him much more than the Chicago Bulls. Now, I still say let the league determine how much he's worth. Okay, that's true, but one thing that I'm going to tell a lot of these people who think that we're just going to sign Josh Giddy and willy-nilly, he's just going to automatically want to come back to the Bulls, just remember something. There are teams that could be looking for a point guard just like Josh Giddy. Again, I'm not saying I want Josh Giddy to leave. But at the same time, I'm not going to be one of those people that guarantees that he stays, even if he's a restricted free agent, especially knowing how good he's been playing in these last 25 games, especially after that game against the Toronto Raptors. A team could, especially like knowing that how a lot of teams, some teams need a point guard, they might look to offer him some money. So, again, I'm being a logical fan in this case. There's a good chance that he could stay, but also there's a good chance that he could go. If a team like a consistent playoff team like the Houston Rockets or somebody else, they offer him that money, he might wanna go. You never know. Anyway, that's just what I believe. Tell me what you think. Again, I'm not saying that he will stay, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't be shocked if he were to go either, especially if a good team comes calling him and pays him that money that he thinks he's worth. Anyway, tell me what you think. Peace.
All right. So, Shay, here's what I'll say to that, right? Yes, there are only about 4 to 5 teams that have cap space of trying to sign Josh Giddy. Only a few of those have over $20 million. Now, some of that comes down to players picking up their player option, things like that. So, no, there aren't a lot of teams that are looking for point guards that can sign him in free agency. I think but there are teams, right? And it doesn't always take just that. You can try to do it with a sign and trade, things like that. I think also you have to also keep in mind that he's a restricted free agent, meaning that the Bulls have the right to match any offer that Josh Giddy gets, regardless of the amount that it is. And when you have a team in the Chicago Bulls that does not have any contracts over $20 million, other than Nikola Vucevic's next year, probably Josh Giddey's as well, but we're talking about Josh Giddy here. The Bulls are in a position where, unless they just don't want Josh Giddy around, they have the right to they can outpay anybody. Keep in mind too, they can offer more money theoretically than anybody as well in the free agency market. So it really comes down to those things. I get what you're saying, and yes, there's always a chance and always a possibility of a team trying to swoop in there and get Josh Giddy. But I think that's what restricted free agency is for. The Bulls would have to make and review the business decision on if that money is worth it, them keeping him. But the Bulls will only lose Josh Giddy of one of a few scenarios. They draft somebody that's a point guard, and then they look at it and say, all right, bet there's no point in us bringing Josh Giddy back, right? 2, that a team's willing to offer him, or he signs an offer sheet with another team, that the Bulls just look at that. They can afford it, right? There's no doubt they can afford it, but they look at that and say, that's just too much money for the value of Josh Giddy. So there's that, right? So those are the scenarios that you're really running into. But I think other than that, it's probably a safe bet that Josh Giddey's going to be back. I already know Winton, well, you can't say that it's guaranteed because that's just who Winton is. He likes to be a contrarian. But those are scenarios, Shay. So we'll see as we get closer to free agency, especially once we get through the draft. We'll definitely have kind of a better picture on all of that, brother. But all right, with that said, let's get into the next voicemail. This one's from the 779.
Hey, been enjoying everything I've been seeing. For the most part, some of the stuff I've listened to, I don't know. I hope I'm not talking too fast because the last two I listened to, last two callers, baggers, whatever you call them, they sound like they're on Thorazine or something. I don't know what's going on. Nobody's scouting Josh Giddy. Those coaches on the other teams the Bulls are playing must be really bad at their jobs. Like, why play that call? I feel dumber. I feel offended for having heard it. Anyway, love you guys. Go Bulls. Keep it up. Keep up the good work, Hayes. Everybody over there at Chicago Bulls Central. Love you. Have a good day.
Now, I played this. Normally, I wouldn't have played this voicemail, but I play this for a couple of reasons, right? Here's what I'll say. If you're going to criticize somebody else's voicemail, make sure that you can leave a better one. And unfortunately, my brother and this is no shot at you, right? Like call in. I want to hear from you. But unfortunately, your voicemail is worse than anybody. Even if you say that somebody said, oh, well, I'm stupid for hearing somebody say the teams aren't scouting for Josh. You said nothing. You left a 30-second voicemail and said nothing, right? Call in. I'm all for everyone. And the thing is, and so I play just about everybody's voicemail unless I can't understand what you're saying, which does happen sometimes, unfortunately, or B, the call is so choppy because I think some people try to call from the middle of the goddamn Atlantic Ocean that your call so choppy that it's just not a good listen to as far as the quality of it. But here's the thing, like, if you're going to criticize somebody else's voicemails, make sure you're leaving a better one and that you can leave a better one, because in the case of this voicemail, this isn't a good voicemail. You literally called and said nothing. And then on top of that, like you say that you couldn't understand it, everybody else could, right? So listen, this is a spot for everybody's thoughts. But if you're going to call in, especially say you're dumber for listening to somebody else's voicemail, think about the quality of the voicemail you just left. But all right, guys, thank you so much. Make sure you guys are following us at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.